Hi there, my name is Aaron Ishmael, and this is the Vintage Geek YouTube channel. Just wanted to welcome everyone here today. It's our first official video for Vintage Geek, and our important announcement today, first and foremost, is the start and creation of the Vintage Geek Computer Museum. Now, for those of you out there who saw the title of this video and thought, I just want to see what this museum is all about and what I can see at the museum, don't worry, that's coming up later in the video. We've got a lot of fun on this channel coming your way because we're going to be talking about a lot of vintage technology. Now, for me personally, this is how I grew up. I'm a child of the 80s, and the first moment I put my hands on a personal computer, I was hooked. That was it. There was no more to it. All I wanted to do was learn everything I could about personal computers at the time. And the probably first experience that I had with a computer was actually an Apple IIE computer that was in the classroom at the school that I went to in elementary school. My mother actually was a teacher in the school, and it was a private school back where I grew up. And back in those days, Safeway, the local grocery store chain, had a program where they were actually helping schools get computers for the classroom, because back then it was still a fairly new thing, and for a private school, getting the funding to get a computer in the classroom was a pretty big deal. Things were expensive back then. We actually got an Apple IIE for the classroom, and I got my first hands-on experience with a computer, and it was amazing. And at the start of the pandemic in 2020, I happened to be helping my mother clean out some things in her house, and she had kept the Apple IIE from her classroom from all those years ago, and in fact was using the Apple IIE up until the very last day of her class when she retired in 2019. And even to that last day, the kids in her class, second graders, absolutely loved playing with the Apple IIE computer. Even with its simplicity and its basic graphics, and the fact that the performance of an Apple IIE could easily be fit in the smallest portion of today's smartphone, it was still a heck of a lot of fun, and it really made me start thinking about the fact that it's important to share these things with people that may not have had experiences with these computers back in that time. This kind of started the whole idea of the Vintage Geek Computer Museum. I'm a software developer by trade. That is my full-time job. Over the past couple of years, I have amassed a large collection of computers, thanks to a little bit of over eBaying, which is a common problem I think a lot of people face during the pandemic era. But also, along the way, I've met some really great people and actually had the chance to do some once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, touring warehouses that were from old Radio Shack stores, being able to go through bins and bins and bins of materials and things that you would not believe. The Apple IIE was my first experience. My first home computer was a Tandy Color Computer 2, and that is really how I learned how to code, using BASIC. Even all those years ago, I was about 10 years old, and I couldn't get enough of using the color computer. It was extremely basic. Everything you had to do, you had to type in yourself and program in, but I was all for it. I was making databases of my comic book collection. I was making maps of the streets in my neighborhood that I could use on my bicycle. I was making everything that you could possibly imagine. And I would say I was probably classified as an uber computer geek, even back then. So I think the Vintage Geek title fits today. Now, this particular Apple IIE here is not necessarily the one that I would have used in the exact classroom, at least not that I remember. I don't know for sure which machine was the first. Based on the era of this particular model and the badging and the actual font of the Apple IIE, it looks like this is a little bit later. Some of the ones I remember actually had the recessed badge. But the point is, it is a machine that's physically from the same school where I grew up, so it has a definite personal attachment for me. We had a number of different games for the Apple IIE, everything that was educational, from number games to word games to educational things all across the board. But some of the most fun games, I will admit, were the non-educational games, which we also had. They just weren't allowed to be played during classroom time. One of those games was a game called Wipeout, and Wipeout was actually based on a TV game show from probably the 70s. I guess it must have been going on in the 80s as well. Someone probably in the comments below will correct me on that. So I do not know all the origin and roots of the show Wipeout, so just putting that disclaimer out there now. But as soon as I got this machine out and cleaning out my parents' garage, and we plugged it in and we went to use it, it's just such an iconic feeling when you put the disc into the drive for the first time and you haven't touched one of these machines in such a long time. it's a very unique feeling. And then you've got the actual physical power switch on the back of the machine, which is just a totally different feeling than anything of modern technology. And the sound is just the iconic part that just brings you back instantly. And everything about the experience of the Apple II is just brings you back to childhood. And this is what I wanted to be able to share with people that may not have experienced it, or that did experience it and just haven't in years, like myself. 8-bit sound effects. You've got the speaker built into the computer. Even pretty impressive graphics for the late 80s. It's also worth noting there's no way of skipping this. And our host has shown up for the game. Welcome to Wipeout. Now, my favorite part of this is that Apple, as well as some other brands, actually made it so that the discs had two sides, and they often contained data on both sides. They were pretty low capacity discs back then. So in the case of this game, they actually had you flip the disc over in order to load the game data, and then it would be able to continue loading the game. The other fun thing about the Apple II was that you could use a keyboard or a joystick. In our case, I don't think that we ever had the joysticks for the Apple II, although I will say that we have acquired some for the purpose of the museum. One of the things we're going to be doing as we do individual videos of different machines over time is highlighting all of the different peripherals that were available for these different computers as the time went on. And it's going to be fun to be able to do some of these. A lot of these didn't have an experience with them personally in my childhood, so just being able to go back and do it is going to be really exciting. And as you can see, we can choose how many players are going to play the game. I'm going to go ahead and say 1. And I'm not great at typing backwards, so I'm going to skip the name entry for now on the game. But you can see this is a lot of fun with the Apple II computer. And this particular game was interesting as I actually did play through an entire round as we fired up the machine for the first time. And I actually found that the game had stored the names of the winners from when I was a kid. And when it stored the names, I actually saw my grandmother's name because she loved playing games as well with my mother and I as a young child. And being able to see that name pop up on the screen after so many years was really pretty incredible. But the Apple IIe is just one example of the multitude of computers that came out during that time. And we're trying to get all these machines back to life. We have some machines that are in full working order. We have other machines that are not working at all, that we may have to go through and fix and repair to get back to a working state. But my goal personally in doing this is to be able to experience firsthand all of the different computers from the time period, because when I was a kid, that's really all I wanted to do. But of course, time, resources, and money wouldn't allow. As I mentioned, these computers were very expensive at that time, and even being able to use one computer in the classroom or have one at home was really more of a rarity than anything else. As I mentioned, we've got Tandy, we've got IBM, we've got Apple, we've got Commodore, and we have a lot of one-off computers that, brands put out. They weren't necessarily long-lived, but they each had their own stories, their individual software and peripherals. We want to cover them all here on the Vintage Geek channel. So one of the things about the Vintage Geek Museum that we're trying to do a little bit differently than a standard museum is that we want to be more than just about seeing things. We want to be about interacting with the vintage technology. And I'm certainly no expert on the different museums that are available in the world or even America for vintage computing. I'm aware of a couple of them, and I've actually seen them, and they're absolutely wonderful. I highly encourage you to go check them out. But what we're trying to do is a little bit different in that we want to give you the opportunity to really get some sit-down, good hands-on time with these machines. And when these machines came out, a lot of the experience was programming and writing code in BASIC. So to that end, we've actually collected a lot of literature and a lot of great old magazines and publications, because at the time, as it was a common hobby, there's just a lot of great material about early programs you could write, whether you wanted to manage your budgets at home or make a database of your favorite collections, or even make maps and make graphics. There's all sorts of different examples, and we have a lot of different documentation so that when someone comes in to visit the museum, they can sit down, and even if they've never written a bit of code before, we have some great examples. You can write a basic program in a relatively short amount of time, depending on how good you are typing, which in my case, there'd be a lot of mistakes, but it's okay. We got plenty of room for mistakes at the museum. This is a way for people to be able to get that hands-on experience and feel exactly how it felt back in those days to use these early machines. So we're looking forward to that, and we're looking forward to seeing you at the Vintage Geek Museum. We do not have an exact opening date yet. We got pushed back on our timeline because our original space had some issues in which the roof leaked, and we ended up having to move our wide collection of items all to one part of the space. We're currently getting reorganized, and as we do so, we're going to be making some videos, probably even have some unboxings of different things that we have discovered along the way and different collections that we ended up acquiring that we haven't even gone through yet. And we're hoping to do that with you on camera here, which is kind of part of the fun. If you like what we're doing or you love anything about vintage computing, please like and subscribe when you get a chance. It's really going to help us out as we're just getting started, and it's going to help the museum grow. As I mentioned, we do not have an official start date yet, but we will let you know on the YouTube channel as soon as we do. And you can start making those appointments to come in and spend some great time with your favorite computers.